So what's that in there? And so
One minute. We'll start in 1 minute. Well, I know it's been a long day, and some have left, and they are going to miss a treat, even though we're on live stream. So they'll get the delayed reaction to it. But we are excited about this last panel, as we want to finish the conference strong, and introducing Brent Wistrom with Austin Eno, and I'll let him introduce the rest of the panel.
Yes, so I'm going to mostly, you guys have the program and probably have seen the basic layout for these fine men here. We have some expertise that sort of hits a cross-section of different types of funding, venture capital, crowdfunding, accelerator, pre-seed type of funding. So just so you guys have a base level of what type of area these guys work in, where their experiences in, introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about what areas they work in. We didn't get our technical act together here. All right, I think I have this right. Yeah, for sure. I was just saying that we have a cross section of expertise here when it comes to healthcare funding, and I was going to just hand it to each of them to explain a little bit about the space they work in and the type of work they do and where their focus is as it pertains to healthcare and technology. So we'll start off here, Rick.
Hi, my name is Rick Davis. I'm the CEO of Lohas Capital. We are maybe the odd duck on the panel, and I tend to be the odd duck representing the alternative financing perspective on most financing panels. We're a financing and marketing innovation company that looks for solutions at sort of that intersection of how you finance and how you market your solution, your company, and specifically focus on the health and sustainability sectors. So companies that have solutions that fit in that health and sustainability realm. One thing I'll note is for our world, when we say health, and there's a wide margin of what falls under that health umbrella, we tend to not think of healthcare. We tend to think of health and wellness or health tech or health and safety. Specifically, we look for companies whose solutions are relatively easy and understandable by a common man and have a marketing angle to them. And so if you are an organization that has a health tech, health and wellness type solution that is a story that can be told and has a clear constituency, but also needs to or would like to raise capital, then those are the types of clients we tend to work with. And so a little bit different than the norm.
I'm Krishna Srinivasan, one of the founding general partners at Live Oak Venture Partners. Been investing in technology startups here in Texas now for 17 plus years, since the beginning of 2000. First time 10 years of that was at Austin Ventures. Then 3 of us left to come out and start Live Oak. Our strategy is to be, so we're investing, the fund is a $108 million fund. Strategy is to be first institutional investor for Texas-based, broadly speaking, tech and tech-enabled service companies. First check is often $2 to $4 million. We are typically take board seats in almost all companies we invest in. It's a classic, traditional, active, on the boards of companies type of traditional venture model of investing. So we don't specifically look for healthcare IT companies. What we definitely do not do are the ones that are more FDA-oriented, pharma, med tech type of companies is what we do not do. As we fondly say, when there is blood, we run away from it, is at least one way to say what we don't do with respect to healthcare investing. But having said that, one of our, frankly, a very positive surprise has been the massive surge actually we see in healthcare, IT type companies here in the Texas market. Quite a bit in Austin, quite a bit in the Dallas market. So as a result, we've spent a lot of time, increasingly so, in those areas. We've got 2 exciting companies, Digital Pharmacist being one of them, and Narrative DX, another one that we announced recently, are both where we were the first investors in both those companies, and both really exciting companies which touch upon a lot of exciting trends in healthcare, and seeing a ton more of activity in just a variety of spaces. So I can see us being quite active in the space in the years to come.
And my name is Hubert Zaitchik. I run Health Wildcatters in Dallas. So Seed Accelerator and Fund. We have the classic model of 12 weeks, small investment, lots of mentors. We've got an interest in all kinds of innovations, so we're not just digital health. That said, the majority of our portfolio, 42 companies we've invested today, is digital health followed by medical devices. And we've both invasive and non-invasive, and the rest is divided between pharma, tech-enabled services, health, consumer goods. So we're all privately backed angel investors, funded and family office funded, and so we look at any kind of healthcare innovation. That said, of course, we have to see ourselves add value in a relatively short amount of time. So specifically, first-time healthcare entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs for the first time executing in healthcare are 2 groups of teams or people that we interact with a lot. Because the networks you have to construct, like understanding anything from HIPAA to FDA and Stark laws, and many more other regulations, and the long sales cycles mean that you have a huge disadvantage if you're not plugged into these networks. You don't know who to go after or who could be making the right introduction. So pretty broad focus. That said, health IT remains strong, and small investments in our case. So we're tiny compared to these guys.
All right. As a journalist, I look at health tech. It's just a monstrous thing, you know. Broadly speaking, everything from the Fitbit to the pharmaceutical. But I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about, when we talk about health tech, what you guys see as the emerging trends to try to separate, you know, what's really hot and what are investors looking for, be it telemedicine or devices, and how are those things different?
Sure. I mean, I'll hit this off and we'll mature over this way. But I think one important thing is to tackle a problem that really is a problem identified by the consumer or the hospital or insurance group, as opposed to coming up with something cool. A good example is what earlier was mentioned, the patient intake forms that are amazingly enough still paper in many cases. Is there a good explanation for that? I've run out of good explanation. There are only bad explanations for that being paper. And I've been on the receiving end. I've got kids who know the drill. Heaven forbid you go to a specialist. More paper. And no, my wife's really good at remembering what all the little things were that happened. I don't. I don't even remember most of my own. I can focus and do it, but it's annoying. So one good example would be no, do not come up with a new patient intake form because you're frustrated at your visit to the physician. It's not a technology issue. It is just not. We understand it's easy to do. Why it hasn't been implemented is multifactorial, and it's one of those frustrating bits about healthcare that are hard to explain. But ultimately, the end users, which in this case would be a physician's office or a clinic, they just have to get your information. And if they haven't found an easy way to get that through an EMR or a digital handoff because you're in the same silo, in the same, let's say, Baylor, Scott and White or Seton, then they just don't have it. So you've got to get it from you. So, but what we often see from the tech side is that people look at a problem and say, oh, we've got to solve this. Well, I can do that. That's just, maybe I just created some micropayment machine form or something. It's not technology. On trends that we like, so look at the problem first and verify and substantiate that there is a big problem. So on the when you look at large insurers, it would be population health tools, which I know we've seen a lot of, but there's still many more coming. On the healthcare side, big data and drawing artificial intelligence, drawing decision-making tools out of artificial intelligence remains a big topic, and also a very ambiguous one, right? I mean, how intelligent is your artificial intelligence? So, do I know enough about that to discern that? I personally don't. We got people, but it gets complicated. On the tech side, a lot of devices are digitally connected, so they are mobile apps or mobile devices like the one that where is it here? The Alive Core, which is the EKG iPhone sleeve that I think Earl mentioned earlier. That can do an EKG. So this is a good example of miniaturizing and democratizing medicine, right? The device that you're looking at here is usually the size of a modest suitcase with lots of wires coming out of it. Now you can take it anywhere. I gave it to one of my friends whose dad lives in India and has no access to a cardiologist. He can run a strip, send it to someone, and he's very well to do over here in the U.S. He just has no means of helping his own father in a country where the access is limited. So it makes him feel better. So there's a lot to be done in this space. Many other subjects like precision health, genetic tools, things like microbiome. So we see innovation in those areas too. There's lots in pharma, of course, as well. But I'll just cap it at that.
Obviously, healthcare continues to be just insanely hot in terms of healthcare means IT. I think if you want to look back at the things that we have gotten excited about, and I try to overlay some of the areas where there are pretty exciting activity in the local market, probably point to a couple of major trends. One is this continued growth in consumerization of the patient or consumerization of your healthcare experience. There is so much of thoughts that have been put into consumerization for traditional retail, but clearly healthcare is finally catching on. Everything from a patient intake form as an example, or capturing patient feedback, patient experiences, and so on, are all just beginning to get captured in this industry. But of course, you require consumerization that needs to be overlaid with all the idiosyncrasies of the healthcare industry. Everything from HIPAA, B, integration with proprietary systems, either it is in the EHR within hospitals or it is the pharmacy back office systems and so on. So what drives consumerization? Who are the trusted channels you can go and work with to go tap into the consumerization? Those are a lot of interesting problems to be tackled there. In our own portfolio, you take the consumerization angle here, clearly digital pharmacists, right, where there are thousands of independent pharmacies which have not worked on a tech consumerization capability there, and digital pharmacists enabling them to finally be in the 21st century and enabling the consumerization of the experience like in any traditional retail is a classic example. Narrative DX, another portfolio company of ours, which is treating the voice of the customer that can be reflected into how a hospital functions and governs itself. Again, every other industry has been surveying and getting tangible feedback and using the feedback process to go improve the way they go about doing things. Quite has not been, the voice of the consumer has not been quite reflected as much in the healthcare industry, and that's why your star ratings that happen, both the hospital case and as Dean Crimson said, starting to happen in the pharmacy industry in 18, are all tied back to what happens with respect to consumerization as a trend that's attacking broad swaths of the healthcare industry. The second aspect that we look for, perhaps a trend, is again, you've heard this many times today, is kind of getting to be, the industry is obviously moving heavily towards getting paid on outcomes. So what do business models look like for people who do everything from deliver software to a hospital, deliver a device for telemedicine purpose, etc.? People used to buy cool gadgets, cool widgets in the industry for the longest period of time, but it's clearly moving towards ROI-based models, PMPM-based models, where can you go characterize, quantify what is happening on an outcomes basis, and of course, technology providers can get paid as a fraction of what a provider, service provider, a pharmacy, etc., can make monetary value in terms of outcomes. You see that even for pharmacies, like we talked about, like Kevin talked about, where the people are getting paid based on adherence to medication, kickbacks, rebates, whatever it is, are all based on how well a patient is ultimately taking their meds. And that's an outcome-based measurement on how a pharmacist can make money. It's more complicated than getting a small piece of a sale. And you clearly see that in significant quantities in all aspects of different business models in the healthcare delivery setup. So look for outcomes-based business models, trying to really figure out what is the measurable aspect of outcomes look like, and getting a piece of the proceeds there as a technology or a tech-enabled services vendor in between is the second trend we look for. So those are a couple of things that, besides, I'm sure there are 10 other things, but at least a couple of things that we paid real attention to in terms of thematic ideas here in this local ecosystem. I would point to those two things.
Yeah, for us, as I mentioned to start, I mean, we very much look for solutions that have a marketing opportunity tied to them, maybe a marketing challenge tied to them, but where there's a clear constituency desiring whatever that solution is. It could be the constituent, it could be this consumer level, and it frequently is, but it could be a medical professional level as well, but that there's a marketing job to be had. There's a marketing challenge there that also coincides with some sort of corporate finance, financing activity. And so the clients that we tend to work with and we tend to see and that we think are good fits for that come really across the board, but tend to be more, like I said, in the health and wellness and health tech areas. Your EKG device, we have a client that has a real-time air monitoring solution. So, wherever you are, they now tie into the phone, and as a device tied to the phone or your keychain or whatever, you can deal with air quality, which for those of us sitting in this room right now, by and large may not be an issue, but if you're pregnant or have asthma or do certain things, you fly a private plane or drive an RV or live in a house that doesn't necessarily, that may have ventilation issues, or you live in India or you live in China or something like that, and you are interested in everywhere you go to know exactly what the air quality is of where you are, those things become more relevant. But they're only relevant to a certain pocket in the market, and so there's a very specific marketing challenge there of how do you reach those folks. But for those folks, they may be particularly motivated to want to support a company and a technology like that. So it's that exchange of, for us, how do you bring crowdfunding and as a financing tool together with a marketing campaign to raise awareness for that particular solution in the context of the specific target audience that they would like. And in this particular instance, client has been around for more than a decade, developing very sophisticated solutions in air and gas monitoring technology for the commercial and industrial sector. So your lifesavers and your firefighters and things like that have been using their tech for a decade or more. But now price points and form factors have come down, so they said, you know what, we can now offer a consumer product. But just because you can offer a consumer product doesn't mean you know a damn thing about taking a consumer product to market. So they had started, we have no collateral, we have no customer list, we have no awareness about these solutions. We also would like to raise some money to begin to commercialize this solution at some point more broadly as a component of our business. And so that's an area that we get involved in and say, hey, look, there are some things that can be done to help satisfy all those opportunities, and there's some very creative financing structures that can be used. And so those are the things we look for, but it comes not just sort of in health tech devices. We've been approached by pharma companies that have, I'd say 98% of them aren't good fits, but a couple of them have things that are going to immediately resonate with a meaningful constituency. So most of what I see on the 5 o'clock news is not a good fit. But there are some things that we think will hit across a broader audience that actually, where it's important to start raising awareness about this kind of solution may exist someday, and start building a constituency that's both aware of it and invested in it, and that helps move the ball forward. But we see a variety of that, and that we tend to think that that's going to continue. It's tied to the consumerization issue, that as more people start to take a vested interest in their health, they don't wait to hear what their doctor tells them that they need to be thinking about air quality. They actually figure out what that solution is, and then how does it tie into to their lives, and then ultimately, because we now have some very interesting new financing laws that have never existed in our lifetimes here up until a year ago, there become a mechanism where you say, hey, for those people who actually care about this, who have a real desire to see the benefits of that, you should be the ones that are actually investing in this deal. I've talked with a CEO of actually a board member of a prospective client of ours that has a pharma solution with a very broad audience of users when they get this solution to market, and was talking about some of our more sustainability, clean tech focused clients, and that the reason we work with them is because their followings, the people who care about that, tend to be very passionate about the environment, and that makes for a great tie-in for these sorts of fundraising angles. And he said, well, the one group that's more passionate than the people who are passionate about the planet are the people who are passionate about not dying, or having their family not die, or living a better life in that vein. And so it's a very good tie-in to customer as investor, and that's the intersection we look for.
I am passionate about not dying.
Are you? See, there's a candidate right there.
Very accessible. For folks out there who are thinking of starting a company, maybe they work at a hospital or a health tech company already and want to jump out on their own. There seems to me that there's more options in health tech perhaps for funding than in a lot of places, because you have a lot of strategic investment. Can you guys just kind of talk about what questions you should be asking yourself if you're somebody wanting to start a company and you think, I'm going to need to get some funding? Do I go VC? Do I go crowdfunding? Should I get an accelerator? Should I look for strategic investment? What questions do they have to answer for themselves before they need to reach that point to know where to target?
We can head back down this way, I guess. So by and large, for us, we work with growth stage companies, or even, as I mentioned, sort of what I throw out as small, medium-sized businesses that have a new solution they're trying to commercialize. So we don't tend to work with startups. We tend to work with companies that have real customers or have raised capital in some capacity or both. But we certainly are approached by a number of those companies, and the area within the crowdfunding sphere that is most applicable there is this sort of rewards-based crowdfunding Kickstarter, Indiegogo world, where for the first time you can really start testing your solution in the market. And in fact, we use it as a marketing tool for clients that aren't ready to, say, raise investment capital, but have a solution, and we like, well, you know what, let's run some marketing, let's run an Indiegogo campaign, let's run a Kickstarter campaign, and start building out collateral, testing messages, building lists and followings, find out who those influencers are that would care. Well, if you're a startup, you can do the same thing, and on some level, that's what those groups are. They're new solutions. They just happen to be a part of a bigger business that are doing it. But if you're a new company, that it's a real opportunity that didn't exist. 5-10 years ago, there wasn't a way to go out and say, you know what, I'm going to go and see what messages resonate, who cares about this, are there people really wanting to invest in it, and use that as a mechanism to literally kickstart the business and get it going. I think that's a fantastic mechanism for the startup entrepreneur that has that idea. There's a heavy emphasis of it, both in Indiegogo and Kickstarter and the health tech device market, and that would be certainly the advice that I would give that party. Now, it's not child's play. You don't just show up and people throw money at you. There's meaningful things that you have to do. Ironically, there was a crowdfunding meetup in this very room last night where they were talking about kickstarting different devices. And there's a lot of sort of expertise around that you would want to think about. But just 5-10 years ago, that path didn't exist at all. You had to find the seed stage VC or the incubator or whatever it was, the angel that believed in that. Now you can literally reach out and say, hey, I think I have a broad audience of people who give a damn about this. Let me find out. And if enough people raise their hand, you go, oh, there's a business there. And enough people don't, you go, well, okay, tried it. Let me move on. So that would be the short advice.
I would tell you there's nothing different and magical about getting going with a health tech company compared to, broadly speaking, any other tech startup. We invest in pre-revenue companies with some early traction, take those 2 companies I talked about. Narrative was a pre-revenue company when we first invested in it. Digital pharmacist came to us once with an earlier business model, which was much more media-centric, and we didn't quite see that to be interesting. They had some early hypotheses about what they're doing now with the current model of independent pharmacy engagement model, and we thought we liked it. We wanted a little bit more traction before we invested, and that business has grown significantly since we made our first investment about 18 months ago. So from our perspective as an entrepreneur, I think the core, it's obviously very, very well served in the industry if you have some domain, more so than many others. You could go start a delivery business, a tech-enabled delivery business, because as a consumer you can relate to something and get going with that, for example. But in the healthcare arena, it really, really helps to get something started if you have some domain in the industry. To really appreciate, is there really an opportunity here? Why now question? Why haven't people been able to crack the nut so far? Are there hidden minefields all over the place here? How do you get access to data? How do you build something defensible and proprietary? Are you fitting with the macro industry trends underway here on outcomes and another macro trend is care moving from a centralized hospital kind of construct to all these distributed centers, either pharmacy or urgent care centers or telemedicine type and so on. The macro changes underway in the industry. Are you fitting with those sort of patterns? Only somebody in the industry would know. So what we would look for is, first of all, a founding team that's got a blend of domain from a healthcare perspective and having some good technology, product chops, combination would be the right ingredients to get a company started. And then the financing strategy for the company, for the entrepreneur, is all about let's raise little money, whatever money, to kind of get to your first inflection point, and take the money from whoever give it to you, right? Venture firm, seed firm, accelerators, crowdfunding, whatever be by the source of capital, take it, because that's the hardest capital to raise. To go from sort of standing start, you've got hypothesis for an idea, and from that standing start hypothesis and idea to get to your first inflection point, which is, or equivalently to the dogs eat the dog food, which is you got your early customer traction of your core customers who buy the concept, are willing to pay for it, and most importantly, are able to demonstrate to you that there's real value for this product. Let's call it the first inflection point of the business. So once you get to that sort of a product market fit, where there are early demonstrations of success, then the next follow-on financing gets easier. Now we're talking about, I got the early traction, I want to start scaling and putting more points on the board. So maybe if that's the way to think about it, the first phase I would call it seed stage. You're going and demonstrating product market fit and early set of customer traction. Then the Series A stage of having the early traction, having some early revenues, and then you're then scaling and growing that and getting a bunch more revenues beyond that. So think of those two phases, and then figure out how to raise capital from friends and family and institutions for that first phase to get to that first point of inflection.
So, a couple of thoughts. Number one, do as much as you can. So going back, just repeating the question on what kind of first steps, and then also where to find funding, and what do we look for. Number one, do as much as you can on your own. I mean, as you, the moment you ask someone who's not a friend or family member for money, you're asking a complete stranger, basically, who's becoming your friend maybe, for money. You wanna have asked all the questions you can ask of your network. I like the iCore program, which is a program that combines a university researcher with a mentor and an entrepreneur, and puts them through a program where really the core of it is to shake down the commercialization hypothesis of a certain product. So can this really go? And so one of the core features they do there is go out. So I'm a microphone challenger. Go out there and ask as many questions as you can, and leave the shop. Go out and knock on doors and find out. You will learn so much. And often we have that idea and we want to just incubate it on our own, and that's the wrong approach. Have it be challenged early. It will be challenged as soon as it hits your first funder, including us as an accelerator. So we will challenge that, and there'll be, in our case, over 100 mentors, and we will find the right ones to sit down with you, and they will be exactly that industry expert that you either asked and you were able to adjust your startup to be a good fit, or you're about to be shot down. Now, not in a bad way, but again, you're asking somebody else to part with money and then to be convinced that this can go places. I think one thing in healthcare, I do think it's more complicated in many respects. I think there are a lot of different things that come in, get in your way, as opposed to just, hey, this is really cool, let's try it out. Well, hey, this is really cool, let's try it out, somebody dies, not a good story, right? So that's why there's so many laws and rules against that you have to deal with. I do not recommend the Theranos model. We just go out there and then invent the laws later, or try to lobby to have the laws removed, or changed, or beg for forgiveness. That is not a good time to beg for forgiveness, because those laws are there for a reason. So I think I would urge you to respect the rules in place. I'm not urging you not to be a rule breaker in your thinking or your approach, but when it comes down to some of those areas, especially if you tends to happen to people who are not in the same, don't have a healthcare background. That's just some stupid law. We just got to change it. Maybe ask several people before you do take that approach. My advice would be do not bank on that. On the funding source side, I think there are a lot of options. So iCore is one example, super early. There are, when you're at university, there are a number of different options, as in SBIRs and STTRs. So those are funding opportunities that further your research to get closer to commercialization. So they are designed for startups.
Are they grants?
They're grants, they're non-dilutive. NIH, NSF give them, and they're competitive. But heck, if you can make it with a startup, you can do that too. You can get that grant. If you really want it, maybe you have to rewrite it a couple times. And no, do I love that? No, I've written my share of grants, and I've gotten more rejections than I've gotten acceptance letters. But you get to that acceptance if you're persistent. So they're a good option, and sometimes we advise a company too to raise angel funds, but don't neglect that route. I mean, keep going there. We have a startup just now that deals with adhesions, which is internal scarring in your abdominal cavity. Usually, we just got $800,000 from NSF. They're commercializing. They got angel money as well, but that's non-dilutive funding. There are also other early stage, semi-philanthropic kind of funds available out there. Those would be regional. You would find out who has access to that, and people would point you that direction. And then when you get into beyond friends and family and fools that invest in you, you're getting into people that will have to, you have to convince on the basis not of your smartness or because you go way back, but truly on that venture. And at that point, I would certainly say that an accelerator would be still softer on you, because the premise with an accelerator is that you come in and as an angel investor, maybe of my laundry list of 10 things that you have to have a check mark next to, 8, 9, and 10 aren't check marks yet. As an angel investor, that's simple answer. The answer is no. I will not invest. I need to have check marks next to those things. As an accelerator, we can look at something that looks really good. We really like where you're going. We really like what you're doing. And we're not faulting you for not having a check mark next to 8, 9, and 10, because that's what you would do next. But that's what you would do if you only had access to the right people, or access to the right mentors, or a team member that's missing, or insights and information. So those are what we regard as fixable issues. I can't fix, there are things we can't fix. If your patent is clearly infringing on another one, tough. Can't really fix that. If you're a bad person and I find out, I can't fix that either. I'm not your parent. If you've got a criminal record and history, I probably just, even if I give you a chance, we've got to have a really good story there, because the next founder is going to look at you the same way, and we don't want to keep running into the same wall. But so that accelerator funding can be from a few tens of thousands to a few 100,000 out of the accelerator fund. And follow-on rounds, in our case, tend to be between $500,000 to $1 million seed rounds usually, that are not coming from us, but they're coming from our network to a large degree. So those are kind of some of the unique funding mechanisms that are out there early, and some are healthcare specific.
It seems like maybe once a week or so, I see one of the bigger tech companies making some sort of play in the health tech space. You see, Apple, Facebook more in mental health, but these big tech companies are making big moves in healthcare. Meanwhile, I think last time I was in this room, Merrick was announcing they're opening an office here to work on some VR and AR stuff. The other Merrick is adding about 900 jobs focused on healthcare innovations. My question is, how big of a threat are these big tech companies and existing healthcare companies with their own innovation wings? How big of a threat are they to founders and investors who are working with early stage companies? What stops them from coming along and basically stealing the ideas and using a bigger team to do it faster?
See, that's, in fact, healthcare is even more a reason why a lot of small companies now can exist in a faster fashion, because there are bigger giants making these big platform bets in all these places. So you can rest on the shoulders of these people. You want to do some very, very clever healthcare app, and then maybe you can get on the Samsung phone on top of their health store, and you get distribution. Or you want to do refills and whatever, learn about drug information, the more smartphones proliferate, you're able to get access to that. So the availability of tech from these big giants is in general not verticalized, right? It's the same as why there's a lot of industrial software available, because none of these guys can take tech and go make it verticalized as much. So I think all our companies stand massively in the shoulders of the giant secular availability of core tech products, based on top of which you can go to pretty interesting things. So the way we see this also is we see a ton of strategic interest in many of our companies for investments. You might even have, in Series A, you'll find a large tech company wanting to be a co-investor, and then we take that, think about it, maybe postpone it, and even by the time Series B comes on board, you have a bunch of tech companies, a bunch of these large giants who want to be co-investors because they know this healthcare is all about finding this rich, domain-centric, finding a wedge, and crushing it, right, is what is key. And many of them don't have that level of keen insight to that complex problem, but they have a core technology, they might have distribution to bring to bear on something, and so they would love to work with that specialist technology company and so on. So I think in some sense the amount of interest many of these consumerized companies pay attention to the healthcare industry is actually a fantastic thing, because it just gives you outstanding distribution channels that otherwise would be very expensive to build. And not only you're taking on a complex industry, healthcare, with all its arcane laws and regulations, and trying to build distribution can be a double complicated proposition. So finding a leveraged mechanism of distribution is a wonderful thing. Let's not be B2C. Can you be B2B2C, for example, and using the second B as a go-to-market channel, as a partner, perhaps it comes with an investment, are all great things to go think about a lot. So in fact, I would urge healthcare entrepreneurs to think more proactively about who could be that second B in that equation, which will make the business much more capital efficient to ultimately go target a large number of patients. So I think it's a welcome thing more than this being an adversarial threat that we got to worry and be concerned about for this industry.
Definitely. So there's a sweet spot where I'm not on board, and that is there are situations where a large corporation might invite you as a really early startup into their space and then develop something with you, and you might become just the only. They may end up becoming your exclusive outlet. So you've just married yourself to them without really knowing the specifics. You just have to know that. I will tell my entrepreneurs, this is great. You may get a good job out of it. Your upside is all tied to that company, and that may be a good thing. But the chances of you having a significant exit for yourself are non-existent. So just be aware of that. It may be good for your situation, but we are entrepreneurs advocates. We're here to help entrepreneurs build companies, and generally, and Krishna would be the same boat. We don't want them to sell out at the first time they hit $1 million in company valuation or two. So that makes no sense for our business models. It makes no sense for the entrepreneurs either. So that's there. But for the largest part, I would agree with Krishna that having more happen in this space is an absolutely fantastic good thing. We've got companies that have large strategic partners on board. Often they want to buy in because they also own 900 hospitals or something like that, and they're going to roll you out throughout 900 hospitals. So you got this strategic who, buys a slice of your company, but what they're really doing is they're saying, hey, let's make our own luck here. We bring the solution in. We can guarantee you rolling it out over the first 100 this year and another 600 next year. But we want to also buy a piece of your company because we know it's going to be very lucrative. So, I'm sorry, I misspoke when not owning that many hospitals, but I meant having a relationship with those as a previous vendor, for instance, or something of that nature. So there are some great opportunities with large strategics. We have several examples that I can think of where that's worked out really well, and for the most part I would not be scared of that, except for when you now have to use their computers and their offices and sign exclusives, and you just have to understand that you just sold your company.
Yeah, there's always the strings attached there. You don't necessarily have control over what they do. Should it do that?
The only thing I would add, I generally agree. I don't think the competitive aspects of it are crushing. I think it creates leverage points for early stage companies. Apple's rumored to be bringing out a wearable non-invasive glucose meter. Pretty amazing. It'll do really well, but if I'm developing something like that right now, or have a product like that that's about to come on market, I'm not turning tail and running because I hear Apple's coming out with that. I'm thinking, what a great opportunity to look for an exit with their competitors as a way to help them keep up with the Joneses, in this case the Apples of the world. So I mean, there tends to be opportunities in that world. Chris was talking about the B2B2C play and getting better at that in this context. I mean, we talk to a variety of companies that have that model and that tend to get frustrated with the challenge of the first B and don't think of the C. And what I mean by that is, well, you think, and a natural inclination is we're not a consumer play. We have a solution that we're selling to healthcare providers, whatever it may be, that ultimately will get to a patient, consumer of some sort. But we're focused on the challenge of getting that business buyer to buy into whatever we're offering. What we tend to talk about is, okay, that makes sense. Does it help, though, in your business development efforts if you have run a campaign to create a groundswell of interest in the C side of it, and specifically the C's of that B, such that you have a variety of them raising their hand saying, that thing over there is interesting to me. I like that thing. I'd like to use that thing. In fact, I already am using that thing. And does that help in the business development efforts? And as a biz dev guy, I know it does. Like, I know I would like to come in before I talk to a business buyer and say, by the way, there's 1,000 of your patients already using it. And so you may want to tie this in and make it an actual part of your repertoire. And in that regard, the more attention and focus that get put on and innovation from those players, I think it's the better off for everyone in this space.
Excellent. Be curious to know, from your perspective, both for founders and investors, what are the strengths that Austin and the broader Texas region have? What are our advantages geographically? Or disadvantages?
I'll let you take Austin.
Yeah, well, we're Pan Texas, so let me give you some of the macro things we see here. So the core building blocks, let's start with that, is you require health expertise and call it IT expertise. I think you have both of those in massive numbers in the state. It's from an IT expertise, second largest number of employers of tech talent in the country after California. And on the healthcare side, you got a lot of people working in hospital systems, working in payer side, working in, of course, in traditional medical device companies, and so on. So the core DNA of talent is available in plenty in this market. Maybe that's why we see that those two forces coming and doing the 1 + 1 = 3 and seeing a big surge of activity with respect to the healthcare IT space. Number two, moving further up the stack, what you want are forward-thinking customers that want to take aggressive chances with early products in some aspect of their business. In Dallas, in particular, we see Parkland, Scott and White, all taking real early chances on early products in different areas. Repeatedly, we've seen examples of those guys being the first lighthouse customers to help figure out something and so on. So I think we see some good early risk-taking that's available, at least in the Texas market, to help prime the pump for those kind of things. And the third part is, I think Texas in general has a long history of good and the bad of this. The good is that you built a very good enterprise town, especially Austin, which means people have built lots and lots and lots of great enterprise software companies here, going back 30 years, just going back Tivoli days and 90s and so on. Yes, you don't have, on the other side, it's not been a great consumer town. We have not seen that many, ground up organic consumer companies break out of this market, but there's a lot of learnings to be had in how you build enterprise software companies in terms of going after how does the product management function work in an enterprise software company? How does the sales function work in enterprise software companies, both with inside sales and enterprise sales happen for generic software companies, which actually is quite applicable to healthcare, right? Yes, selling into hospitals is incredibly arcane and very, very challenging to make it happen. I've seen a lot of people make that appropriate transition in very complex enterprise software type ticket sales to make the transition here. So, and that again plays to this whole B2B2C kind of plays in this market, where the first B2B is something that people in Texas can completely crush because there's just a lot of DNA and a lot of expertise available in those areas. So you go look at the full stack here. You have talent, you have good lighthouse customers who can help take this talent to kind of the first beachhead or the first inflection point, and then for you to grow and scale beyond that, you got good expertise available and good models available here in this market for able to grow and so on. So that is why now I take a step back, we see pretty much a wide swath of healthcare IT well represented here, either people selling into hospital systems, selling into peer groups, or consumerization of some products in telemedicine, etc., who are bring a breadth of these skills to bear on building these kinds of companies here in this town. So, the exciting next set of years to come in Texas, given these kinds of strong abilities available here.
So I couldn't agree more. I mean, on the Austin side, we've got several startups here. Cloud9's right over there, so with they're one of ours, and a few others. So we love Austin, and I think there's some great stuff coming out of here. Also makes it easier. It's a quick commute. I think specifically in digital health, there's a lot happening here. And if I was forced to differentiate, I would probably say maybe more consumer facing, maybe B2B2C, and in Dallas more corporate software, IT,
back office
type of stuff. If I was forced to find one, I would guess at that one a little bit. But nevertheless, strengths in both. And Pan, Texas, on the healthcare side, I don't think it's a coincidence. It's the dynamics of the state still doing very well and getting great influx of people, talent, and companies moving here, both large and small. And in Dallas, we've got a whole bunch of corporate relocations into DFW, Toyota, and State Farm and others. So big corporations moving in as well. And you could argue that's bad for your talent pool because they're sucking it all up. But no, they're bringing more in, and I think overall it's a plus. Then overall on the healthcare side, we have tort reform here with physicians that have certain limits on the type of exposure they have on the risk side, which has been positive for physicians. There's also more lenient rules on co-ownership of medical facilities for physicians. All that to say that it's the most entrepreneurial state for physicians. I run the chapter of Society of Physician Entrepreneurs in Dallas, and Texas simply is the state with the highest level of independent physicians still, and that's a dying breed, but it's a reflection of what we're allowing our state to do. And I'm an immigrant, but in my view, it's the America of opportunity that we now have in Texas, and I think people recognize that. Going away from finding the place within the state, within the country, that's the most reflective of allowing people to pursue opportunity. So I think a lot of good things.
The other side of that coin, if I may add, and once again, we don't focus in, say, enterprise software companies for this space, or what I'll call, highly sophisticated technologies, or biotech, sophisticated biotech. And I can imagine that there are paths for financing and a variety of that. But I do think that there remains a challenge for things that fall outside of the norm, fall outside of the enterprise software for fundraising, whether it's health tech or digital or otherwise. While I'm sure both these guys are closing the gap, there is still a challenge raising capital in those spaces in the state. There is everywhere, but it is more acute here than, say, it is in Boston or the Bay Area. And so, while we work nationally and even internationally, we certainly see things here that I know have challenge that are sound plays that have real resonance in the market, but are having challenges raising the capital they'd like to raise.
I just want to check on time real quick. Want to leave time for questions?
We'll start questions in about 2 minutes.
Okay, got time for a little bit more. We're talking about the future here. How do you see things changing in the next 2 to 3 years, and what keeps you up at night when you think about that?
So the things that we think about, because we work in a sort of peculiar and very new space, is the lack of education around the opportunities that exist. So there are some very interesting and very compelling financing laws that, acts that have occurred that make fundraising and new paths to fundraising very realistic. There are some compelling strategies around how to use those to grow your business that may have very little to do with fundraising, but are very little understood and certainly not necessarily well executed. So we spend a lot of our time in panels like this educating companies about, hey, there's an opportunity out there for you to run a negative cost marketing campaign. Have someone else pay for your marketing. Grow your business that way. Have you thought of how you use financing as a mechanism for doing that? We spend a fair amount of time talking with investors to say crowdfunding and some of the opportunities within that sort of broad range of crowdsourced financing isn't the enemy, isn't a competitor, but is actually an interesting leverage point that can and should be taken advantage of. And so I wouldn't say necessarily it's keeping me up at night, but the main thing we see in the future, and I think all of the big market prognosticators that track the areas in which we work talk about, is it's going to get big. And so what we don't know is, when is that inflection point? Is it 6 months or 6 years? And what we want to make sure we've done is create sort of a thought leadership position in that space, so that whenever that inflection point is, we're there to take advantage of it, but B, to help as many companies as we can think through some avenues that may be non-traditional in focus. So I see that as the future. I see that as our position in the future. And I see more companies taking advantage of it. The data is already there. We know more companies are taking it. It doubles in size about every quarter. And so we continue to work down that path.
Well, what I say might be unpopular with the Keep Austin Weird movement. We actually would like to see more people in this domain move to Austin or move to Dallas. I think we have a lot of good the DNA is there with respect to the core elements of building exciting companies. But as you want to start to scale these companies, you would like to see people kind of who've been there, done that in the health tech product type arena. More product management expertise, more sales leadership of people who have sold big deals into hospitals and into payers, etc. So we just require, we don't have as many companies yet in the full spectrum of healthcare tech in the broader market. So the ecosystem of scaled companies is not quite there in the market. And so talent needs to therefore be important in many instances. So would love to, we can either wait for the next 5-7 years of a lot of great companies which are learning on the job in some sense how to scale and how to be effective, and that could, of course, 5+ years would start to produce the talent that's been there, done that, to be the next generation of entrepreneurs, next generation of leaders in the next cycle of exciting companies here. Or we can, magic and traffic gets worse and we find more people migrating from Boston and California, which has had a better share of more scaled companies here in these kind of spaces who end up moving here and being part of the leadership ecosystem for these companies here. So that's one thing we think a lot about, and we could facilitate some good people from other parts of the country moving here to be part of the journey here.
Yeah, that is counter to the acceptable culture here. I was talking to a health tech company at an event, a social event like this at South by Southwest, and there was a founder of a very cool health tech company, device company in Philadelphia, and I was trying to convince her that this is the place she needed to be, and there was another woman there that said, how dare you talk to someone else about moving to here? You know, we're supposed to tell people this is a horrible place and you should never come. And that is very much, for those of you not from Austin, the mentality here of don't have anyone else move here. But I would tend to agree, the more bright people we have here, the more opportunity it creates for all of us.
I think that I think we're just scratching on the surface in health technology. Healthcare is woefully behind. As much as we can get excited about things like this, there are so many things we can't even measure yet, and there's so many things we don't even know anything about it. I mean, the microbiome that was mentioned just a minute ago, just to blow your mind, think of any drug that ever failed. Obviously, that drug had some promise. The reason it failed is genetics, most likely. We just didn't know it. Somebody had an adverse effect, something happened, the drug was shelved. Usually, a lot of money went into it to develop it, and that's just one aspect. The solution to that, of course, is to find out what happened there. Chances are there's some sort of a genetic aberration in a part of the population that cannot benefit from that drug. So any drug that's been out there, that's been developed, we have a great example in Dallas with bardoxolone, a drug that can actually increase kidney function, unheard of, but it had an adverse effect and was shelved, and now they're working on it again. But just to blow your mind on that, any drug that ever failed can be looked at again, and as long as the laws are right, so that whoever spends the money can actually benefit from the furtherment of that drug. Could benefit. All you have to do is test the respective patient, make sure that he or she didn't fall into the category that adversely react. So that's incredible. But it keeps going. What we heard about CRISPR earlier and the ability to change fatal diseases. Anyone who's been in healthcare has seen kids and babies die, has seen relatives or others suffer, a lifelong suffering, because the treatments are suboptimal. Well, you are talking about curing, just like with the hepatitis C drug, you're talking about curing those diseases. It opens Pandora's box, of course, because can you make me superhuman, make me faster, make me stronger? Those are all things we're going to have to address. But again, a huge, absolutely stunning area. You see it on the ability to make artificial organs or grow your own, and that's just on the bio side, and there's so much more on that side. A lot of these things are going to have to be managed by digital means, and so that means huge amounts of data, processing, analysis, development. So we are just scratching on the surface. And to your point earlier, that topic isn't going to go away. How many more ways can you make my banking app better? I think next month we all have, I think the big banks agreed to have a money sharing tool now that will be rolled out across all platforms. But there is a point at which you say, okay, cool, let's do it. There is no point at which you say, oh, I don't care for that medical innovation. That'll just give me 2 more years. That'll just make me feel a little bit better, or
save my child,
let
make my mother live longer.
Yeah. So I just think that there's so much yet to be done. What we haven't seen, I think there's one big gap. I'm uniquely exposed to a lot of it, and that is we spend a lot of money on research. I think we're wonderful in that, and I think that needs to continue, and that's forward thinking. This created a brain gain for this country that is unprecedented. I'm a small one of that, the brain gain. But I too moved to this country because of opportunities in research. But on the other hand, we haven't really democratized the early stage investment process yet. I mean, you guys play a role in that. I think in healthcare, people are passionate about the things they see, and to allow that early stage seed capital to flow a little bit more freely, not willy-nilly, but more freely into worthy projects has not happened yet. And so I think there's a lot of that happening. That will I think affect a lot of early stage opportunities that then grow.
So can I get a copy of that last snippet there of Dr. Hubert's there? No, I obviously completely concur. That's where I think the big flow will come.
Yeah, let's open up for some questions.
Three quick questions.
So, Krishna, you had mentioned Austin's had success with enterprise-style businesses for the past 30 years, and you think something that's novel that we should be looking at is consumerization, so we can move from the B to B to the C, right? Well, when we move to that C, we have to account for the cost per acquisition of a user and the value of that user. And I was curious, how do you feel that the Austin venture scene receives the idea of not having a SaaS-based business model, but having a SaaS plus business model that actually accounts for the data that you have that's associated with each user, right? So that you have an average revenue per user model, plus you have a SaaS model that's tied to the B side of things. Our company, for example, we've spoken with some of the venture groups here in Austin, and they're more stuck on that old SaaS model, and I was curious if y'all had any reception to or feedback on that type of a model.
Well, that's maybe I could have sat on the other side here and had you talk about this, because actually our strong preference is very much to be in the SaaS plus business model. In fact, half the portfolio is of SaaS plus. And we think of this as well said. We think of this as kind of an act one is running a SaaS play, which often you might not have big enough market opportunity because there are only a certain number of hospitals, certain number of beds in these hospitals, there's only a certain number of pharmacies, or a certain number of doctors' offices, and you can only get paid so much on a SaaS basis. The more exciting, often the real multiplier on market opportunity ends up being, as you go crush the first act, what does act 2 look like? So, in fact, a natural question not come about here. I strongly urge you all, healthcare in particular lends itself to doing this, where there is plenty of exciting patient data that flows through, insights that flows through, but how do you think about monetizing the act 2 of it in a consumer-centric fashion or a patient-centric fashion? And there are so many people who, that's a gold mine of it available there, and demonstrating what does it take. Of course, you have to get to some scale on the B2B side before you can get to your act 2, but actively thinking about what that second act looks like, and what point of time can you turn the tap on, make the act 2 come together, is something we think a lot about for every one of our companies. And I strongly urge you all to spend time thinking along those lines. So thanks for bringing that light here.
That's in essence using SaaS as a data trap, which I mean that trap in a good way. There.
I mean, it builds competitive moat for the business and makes it much stickier, etc., etc.
Other questions?
Yep.
Just a quick question. I mean, what are your thoughts on retailization of healthcare? For example, particularly with regard to non-chronic, critical conditions markets such as dermatology, dentistry. There's a lot of consolidation happening there. So, have you seen innovation in technology-enabled services for that market?
And what was your first sentence?
Healthcare retail.
Retailization. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's a consumerization of healthcare. Absolutely. I would say that the patient has run out of patience. The healthcare consumer has arrived. I probably stole that from somewhere. I don't know where. I like it. I keep using it. So, but there is an aspect to that was touched on earlier between MacGyver and Simpson. Right? And so MacGyver is going to keep doing that, and Simpson needs to be educated. So we need to work on both sides there. The educated healthcare consumer will continue to push and want things, and the reason is he or she uses a cell phone and all sorts of other things to really run or navigate their lives, and then they walk into the physician's office and get handed a stack of paper. I mean, that's the ultimate buzzkill, right? I mean, immediately, what the heck is going on here?
So I think the consumer drives that story, and the consumer will vote with his or her feet, because when you walk into a doctor's office where they do that, and the next day you walk into one where that is seamless, as long as I'm free to go wherever I want and my insurance plan, things are starting to move. So I think that's a process that will take a little bit of time. Big insurance groups certainly play a role in that, so they can kind of. But ultimately, that's where I see healthcare consumers acting. Also, what touched on earlier on the big deductibles. Don't forget, those big deductibles are re-educating our healthcare consumer in that there is a cost to this. The healthcare consumer has been the healthcare. It's like the all-inclusive Club Med system, right? So I'm a consumer, right? But you forget all about what this all costs. You just eat whatever you can at the club because you're on price sensitive. So this reintroduces price sensitivity to a consumer now with the big deductibles. It makes sense to get the $200 MRI over the $500 or $1,000 MRI. So again, that's a consumer that's starting to ask questions. His or her own dollars now coming out of their pocket. So I think again we see more of that behavior.
So the way we think about it is many of these vertical, let's call these uber verticalized software opportunities, selling them to dentists, physical therapy clinics, dermatologists, whatever it is. So the assumption number one is the product that's being sold here has got some level of specialization which is more verticalized in nature. And so maybe it's patient scheduling, maybe it is practice optimization, whatever it is for that context. So the good news and bad news in that is, the good news is, if you think of it like a SaaS business, like the gentleman said, you can potentially get to a pretty low cost of customer acquisition. You know your 100,000 physical therapy clinics in the country. You know your 100,000 dentists in the country. You know your 50,000 dermatologists, and you know the economics really well. In a highly targeted fashion, you can go acquire customers pretty effectively. So you can potentially pretty rapidly build a business which is highly focused on that specific vertical industry. The challenge is, so what does Act 2 look like there? Because there is often an issue that maybe you get paid $20 per month per clinic or whatever it is, then there might not be enough of an addressable market where you're in that narrow niche. So unless it's extendable to other verticals, but then you would think about how genericized your solution versus being applicable other places. So it becomes an addressable market question versus ease of customer acquisition, cost of customer acquisition tension is what you would have to play against to see if there is a venture backable business of that. So that's why the Act 2 starts to be relevant is, can you go close these physical therapy software, for example, but then what else do you do with it as a next act here to go build a $50 to $100 million plus business? Is there an opportunity there or not? And that's the big open question.
Let's get final thoughts.
I guess keep Boston weird. We live in Dallas, so we need you guys to stay weird. I'm pro the argument is very excited about what is yet to come in healthcare, and I see it. Of course, I've got the privilege of dealing with so many startups and so many entrepreneurs that I see what's coming, and I see sometimes people bumping into the walls, but then you see them break through and they hit the next stage, and it's tough. It is even harder in healthcare, but it's extremely gratifying to see changes and improvements because they have a double or triple bottom line for us. And so as a physician by training, this gives me a very significant amount of pleasure to see that happen. So I think there's a lot yet to come. I do think there is an early seed stage capital funding gap, and obviously we experience it all the time. That can be helped a little bit, and I think it will change, and it might very well come from the consumer side because get a few thousand consumers together with $20, you can do a lot of things, and that's something that's breaking through. And overall, I'm also staunchly convinced that this country and specifically this state gives us opportunities that we often don't stop down to think about. We just
don't stop to think about how would this go if I were in XYZ country. Don't take it for granted. It's hard here, but it's you don't want to switch. It's promising.
I think it's an exciting time to be a healthcare tech company investor in the Texas market right now. Of all segments, I would say it's the fastest growing vertical segment in the state, one where we have seen the biggest surge year-over-year amount of opportunity. You all are in the space right now, so you're on the ground floor of what I strongly believe, having seen this market for 17 years, what I believe is one that will explode in its growth and scale over the next decade. But those on the ground floor obviously experience both the good and bad. The good being you're one of the rarefied few who are pushing it, and the bad, of course, is you are in the ecosystem is not quite there yet. So what I would say is we should all stay the course, and as entrepreneurs and investors, and hopefully reap the gains of that, of being the early entrants in this geography, in the space, and 10 years from now, along the way, we'll all be richly rewarded. At least that's the basis for how we think about the market.
Yeah, I tend to also be very optimistic about this in this time. Perhaps because we are very deeply entrenched in some new paths, but there are some exciting new ways to grow a company that did not exist even a year ago. And that 99% of the market out there is still not really aware of what they are and how they can be used. And that is changing, and that should make everyone excited about not only opportunities for those who are entrepreneurs or who work with entrepreneurs, investors, accelerators, others who support entrepreneurs, but also just in general those of us who can benefit from cool stuff that gets to market that otherwise wouldn't have. I agree with you that we haven't even hit the surface of what's possible on the health side. It is a market that is behind. By the way, it's the same thing I believe on the clean tech sustainability side. These are things that by and large we haven't even really gotten there yet. And there is a very passionate consumer base out there who cares about either their health or the health of the planet in some capacity. And we see more and more innovation come out in this space every day. And now there really are some very cool ways to get the word out and or get the money. Growth comes down to customers and capital, and there are some very interesting paths now to tackle both of those things that didn't exist just very recently and never in our lifetimes. So I'm deeply optimistic about the future of not just health tech and healthcare and Austin, but just in general that this is an exciting time to be in this space.
Time to go educate Homer Simpson.
There you go.
Well, thanks very much, guys, for having us, and appreciate it.
Real quick, Joshua at a Learning Main Street. Is he here? Joshua, you got one. He's one of our two. Russ Kringle. Russ, I've got you right here. Okay. Live strong here, so they are the ones who do. Thanks again for coming. Two things. One, please respond to that survey. We want to get feedback on this conference, future program, the things you like to see Health Tech Austin do in the future. Second, there's a post-reception right over there in the restaurant lobby. Continuing that way. Thanks again for coming.
All right.